really making mayonnaise sandwiches and lemonade out of what was left over in the cafeteria. So I just applaud that at least the ball is starting to move forward.
So we've addressed the sports betting bill, its likely future this year. Briefly, 15 seconds left. Where do you see this going?
You know, it passed out of the Senate Higher Ed Committee. Senator Palumbo's companion version did. We'll see if we can get it moved onto the Senate floor, maybe come back for the House for more discussions. But I've been in conversations with some senators from California, some legislators from Colorado, and I think the more states who start to do something in this arena, the more likely we're going to force some change at the national level.
Well, we're out of time. Thank you very much, Representative Stokesbury, Representative Pettigrew.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, thanks.
Still ahead on The Impact, lawmakers hold hearings on an initiative to bring back $30 car tabs and slash local transportation taxes.
Urges legislature to reject it out of hand and offer no alternative in its place.
The constituents I hear about on this issue from my district overwhelmingly support it.
The debate over I-976 and its impact on taxpayers and transportation projects. Plus, a look at a major transportation proposal with a carbon tax attached. That's coming up next on The Impact.
Want a legal education?
Thank you. May it please the court.
Watch arguments before the state's highest court.
Why shouldn't we reach the threshold voting requirement?
How do we know what happens in the next case where that happens?
This is an effort to seek judicial review of the mayor's decision affirming the fine.
The state Supreme Court, unedited and as it happens, only on TVW.
Well, you know, here in Washington State, we're blessed with so many locations. It's our natural environment, history, it just runs the gamut. And these are locations that I've looked at over the years, and I just look at them as being very, very special. So I hope that everyone enjoys my favorite places.
Pass it, ignore it, or propose something else. Those are the three options facing state lawmakers on Initiative 976 to make vehicle tabs a flat $30 statewide. It would mean a big tax cut for drivers and a big budget cut for transportation authorities around the state. The $30 car tab initiative 976 would eliminate local taxing authority for transportation benefit districts which levy fees to pay for things like road work and transit. It could have a particularly big impact on Sound Transit and the ST3 initiative in King, Pierce, and Snohomish counties. Drivers in the three-county area are paying higher fees since a local initiative was approved in 2016. Sound Transit says it would cut $20 billion from its budget over 10 years and force projects to be delayed or canceled if the agency is forced to rapidly retire bonds. Initiative sponsors say the transit agency's use of inflated vehicle values to tax drivers is fueling support for the initiative.
It is by far, of all the initiatives that I've ever done, the one that moves people the most, because people across the economic spectrum really feel the impact because they have to write that check each time. It's not buried in a property tax bill. It's not hidden somewhere. You have to write that check.
976 is a false premise to our community, which offers a loaded question of if people want cheaper car tabs without outlining the true impacts to their community. We have been down this path before with the proponents of the initiative, and it led to devastating impacts to our transit systems across the state.
Opponents urged the legislature not to oppose an alternative, saying it could confuse voters. They argued that once people know what 976 will do to regional transportation systems, they will vote it down. Sponsor Tim Iman says state voters have already approved $30 car tabs twice, and he expects them to do it again. Senate Transportation Committee Chair Steve Hobbs is pushing a major transportation funding package with big projects and a big price tag, partially paid for by a proposed carbon tax. The package includes a flat $15 per ton fee on carbon emissions. The proposal would raise state fuel tax to 55.4 cents per gallon. That's an increase of 6 cents a gallon. It would raise the electric vehicle fee by $200, raise the enhanced driver's license fee by $30, and a clause in the package would prohibit the governor from implementing a new low-carbon fuel standard. In exchange, Hobbs says the proposal would create 65,000 jobs, pay for all the fish culvert replacements required by a federal ruling, and cover the cost of replacing the I-5 Columbia River Bridge that connects Vancouver to Portland. He says it would also pay for work on the PCC rail line, and it would cover the cost for the electrification of state ferries, as well as putting $500 million towards stormwater projects to reduce a major cause of pollution in the Puget Sound. Critics say it's an expensive proposition when the state has a $3.2 billion surplus. They argue that voters have rejected carbon tax and fee initiatives twice. Hobbs says those initiatives, as well as other carbon-related bills in the legislature, did not dedicate money for state transportation. He argues that it makes sense to dedicate carbon tax funding to state transportation infrastructure because vehicle exhaust is the primary source of carbon emissions in Washington. You can catch The Impact anytime online at tvw.org. Find out what's coming up and let us know what you think on Facebook and Twitter at The Impact TVW and at TVW News. That's all the time for this week's show. We hope to see you back here next week for more in-depth interviews you won't find anywhere else. I'm Mike McClanahan. Have a great week.
Support for The Impact provided by
Seattle Children's is working across Washington to protect youth from firearm tragedies. At Children's, we believe that we must approach firearm safety issues in direct collaboration with stakeholders representing wide-ranging views. It's why we helped found the Washington State Firearm Tragedy Prevention Network. As part of our effort, we've distributed over 5,000 free firearm storage devices at safety events throughout Washington State. Learn more at seattlechildrens.org.
WSCCU was founded by public employees, and since 1957 we've been returning the favor and honoring them. We're here today at Public Service Recognition Week. This is one of the ways that we give back not only to our members, but also all public employees who make Washington such a great state to live in.
TVW, opening state government to the people of Washington, with unedited coverage of the state legislature, the governor's office, and the state Supreme Court, state government agencies, campaigns and elections, and public policy events in all corners of Washington. Plus, our award-winning produced shows and documentaries that offer in-depth, balanced coverage of political events and policy decisions. TVW, opening government for the people of Washington. Get more from TVW. Follow us on Twitter at TVW News and find us on Facebook for exclusive content and more. Another way for you to connect with TVW.
Support for TVW provided by
It begins with us. The first cup of coffee. The first text. The first hug. It's all possible because highly trained professionals are working hard every day to provide the clean air energy that powers your life. Nuclear, wind, hydro, and solar. Energy Northwest produces enough carbon-free energy to power a city the size of Seattle. Find out more at columbiavalue.com.
Fair, nonpartisan political coverage turned to TVW. Throughout its trademark gavel-to-gavel coverage of state government and its award-winning produced shows, TVW covers the issues that matter to you, in depth and in balance. We bring you the best arguments on both sides of controversial issues direct from the source, on TV and online. For balanced political coverage, turn to TVW.
Support for Inside Olympia provided by
Geography has made us neighbors. History has made us friends. Economics has made us partners. And necessity has made us allies.
We're all neighbors in one sense or another. What ties us together is what fuels the future of our communities. The Western States Petroleum Association is dedicated to ensuring Americans have access to reliable petroleum products and supports economically and environmentally responsible policies that benefit everyone. After all, we're all neighbors.
A commitment to strong communities. That's what PEMCO Insurance is all about. Since 1949, from Linden to Longview, Walla Walla to West Seattle, we put our members first, making sure we give back so we can all move ahead. Whether it's providing a chance for those who might not otherwise have one, or supporting TVW to help improve our corner of the world, PEMCO cares about the same things you do. We believe in TVW's mission and in transparent government, because informed citizens benefit all of us.
This week on Inside Olympia, as Democrats assert their control in the Washington legislature, they're considering a number of worker rights measures. What's on the agenda, and what do these proposals mean for employers? On the program, Democratic State Senator Karen Kaiser and Republican Curtis King, both of the Labor and Commerce Committee. Plus, we meet one more new member of the state legislature, Democratic State Representative Deborah Entenmann. That's next on Inside Olympia.
From the TVW studio, it's Inside Olympia with host Austin Jenkins.
And welcome to Inside Olympia. The Washington legislature this year welcomed its most diverse freshman class in history. In our second half hour, we'll meet one of the new lawmakers who's also a member of the newly formed Black Caucus in the Washington House. But first, a higher minimum wage, equal pay, and paid family leave. Those are just some of the labor policies that have been adopted by Washington voters or lawmakers in recent years. This year, as Democrats assert their larger majorities, they have even more proposals aimed at addressing the rights of workers. But as always, there are tensions between labor and business, Democrats and Republicans on many of these policies. Joining me now to discuss these and other topics and the fault lines are Democratic State Senator Karen Kaiser, who chairs the Labor and Commerce Committee, and State Senator Curtis King, the ranking Republican on that committee, who also does double duty as the ranking member on the Transportation Committee. And as you've pointed out, Senator Kaiser, you're not just limited to labor and commerce.
No, I'm President Pro Tem also,
right,
as well as Ways and Means member and Healthcare member.
And Healthcare. And in terms of topics that this particular committee deals with, it's not just labor and commerce topics either.
That's right. We do a lot. We do gambling. We do all the vices, I guess should say. We do marijuana and we do liquor. And it's a lot of different elements of the business community we work with, and we work with together. It is kind of refreshing in a way because there aren't the same fault lines for those issues as there are for some of the labor issues.
Well, let's just step back, and I'm sort of always interested in where we find ourselves in this moment in time on a particular issue. So, you know, labor and business, labor and commerce, there's always tension between employers and employees and a lot of these policies. For years, the conversation and the debate was around workers' compensation. For a while, there was split control. You were a chairman for a time. Now Democrats have control again. So as you think about sort of the story of labor and where things are going and headed in terms of unions and workers' rights and this, you know, we're in this era of the gig economy. Mm-hmm. As the Democratic chair, majority party at this point in 2019, what's that 30,000-foot view look like?
Well, I've been in the legislature a while, as you know, and I've always had a focus on work and family issues, how they intersect. And that includes things like child care and health care and all those other things that intersect with people who go to work every day. And I remember when I first started, I actually proposed a bill for paid sick leave, right? I was laughed at when I went to my Chamber of Commerce, right? It was a new idea. It was a universal idea of having paid sick leave was just beyond the pale at that point. It has been passed. It is now law, and people are adjusting to it. Gives people a little more flexibility in their jobs. My concern for working people has been that wages and benefits have really been flat. The shift of healthcare costs have gone on to employees in many cases, and wages have not been increasing. So people are really struggling. That's why you see, in terms of younger workers, really almost a reluctance to commit to things like buying a home or a car even.
So you're representing King County is your district. You've got a lot of commuters. You've got a lot of working class people in your district. You're representing you're from Central Washington, the Yakima Valley, a more rural and more agrarian community, but the economy is changing everywhere. So as you think about this tension that is not a new tension, but there are new overlays to it, how would you sort of set the stage for this conversation in 2019 as we talk about labor and commerce issues?
Well, obviously the jobs that are created come from business. And we need to make sure that business can be competitive. We are no longer just a local economy. We are a national and international economy. And so as you look at that, a lot of our companies have to be competitive. They have to be able to manufacture and sell their products at a competitive price to maintain their viability. And so it's a balance between, you know, what is good for the workers and balance it with how do you keep that business alive and thriving and making money. Making a profit is not a dirty word. It is what has made this country what it is. It's what gives people incentive to open a business and put their pocketbook in their neck and work their tails off to get their business to be viable and sustainable. And those are the things that I look at as we move forward. I had employees. I tried my best to take care of those employees in the best way that I could. I would tell you, and it's not just me, but it's true of a lot of employers. There were times where my brother and I took a pay cut so that our employees didn't have to. Now, they didn't get a raise, but they didn't get a pay cut. And we felt that was the most viable thing we could do. So it's a balance, trying to make sure that balance is there, that it's fair, it's equitable, both to the employee and to the employer.
The pushback we hear on a lot of these policies supported by Democrats, that the labor unions support and the labor movement support, is that they are adding bureaucracy and regulation and cost.
Well, Austin, what I would say is that what I think's happened in the private sector is that labor is restricted in its competitiveness. You can shop around for better wages usually, but if you have a non-compete contract, you can't move on. If you have, if you work for a franchise that has poaching agreements with other franchisees, you can't move on. If you have a non-disclosure agreement, you are limited in what you can say and what you can do. Those kinds of legal restrictions they're now in place for about 40% of the entire workforce, including wage earners in the $40,000 to $50,000 range. It has, I think, dampened the competitiveness of labor because you can't go shopping for better wages or benefits or a better job if you have a non-compete that you're stuck with.
So what I hear the senator saying is that you mentioned balance, that things are out of whack right now, and that the workers are being held back, that they're not getting what they need in this economy necessarily.
Well, I think if you look at most industries, you're going to find that there's a shortage of employees. And there needs to be non-compete clauses. I'm not sure that they need to be at the $50,000 income level, but we need to look at those things, and I believe we are looking at those things. But there are proprietary information that needs to stay with that company, and they need to protect it. And I would say that nobody is forcing that employee to sign a non-compete. If they don't want to sign it, they can go somewhere else and find another job and look for it. And there are jobs out there. As I say, there is a shortage of workers in almost every industry that we're looking for. So again, it's a balance of, are the non-competes reasonable? Are they fair? And then, you know, there's an option for that employee.
And that is one of the bills we're working on and negotiating with each other about as well. So that's topical at the moment. Right. Really topical.
And is it the type of thing where you think you might get to some sort of bipartisan agreement around these non-compete?
I think there's been a lot of movement on both sides. Yeah. So that's always encouraging to me.
And I would agree. We're working very diligently. My opinion is we're very close to having an agreement. And I'm hoping in the next 2 or 3 days we can get there, and as we have on a variety of bills this
Right,
year.
I want to bring up another issue that we've worked together on is the sexual harassment issues. You know, the
That's
Me Too
another
movement,
overlay of this.
That's right. The Me Too movement has really sparked a new consciousness about what's really acceptable in the workplace and in between coworkers and with supervisors and bosses. And so we've been working together for the last 2 years on various pieces of that picture. Again, dealing with things like non-disclosure agreements, because with the NDA, you can't necessarily complain to the EEOC about a sexual harassment case, but you can now in this state. This year, we passed unanimously a bill that would focus on the low-wage workers who work alone, the housekeepers in hotels, the security guards, the janitors in office buildings, who are very vulnerable. And we weren't on the same page at first.
No, we were not.
We were a little far apart, and we had to work it out. And in the end, it passed unanimously over to the House.
So so that's interesting. What changed?
Well, I'll give credit to the good chair, because when the bill came out, it had a very broad definition of what was defined as an isolated worker, and that was our objection. And as the two of us talked, and as we worked through the issue, we narrowed it down and narrowed it down. The hospitality industry, for example, was in favor of this bill, wanted the bill. They've been working on a program similar to that. But as we talked, as we started to get closer, we got to a point where I could say, you know, if this is what we include, I can support that bill. Senator Kaiser was willing to listen and move forward under those circumstances. Not that it was me, but I give her a lot of credit for the fact that we got a bill out of here that was contentious at the start. But to see it pass 49-0 says we worked. It is a good bill. We got to the point where we think everybody could support it, and they did. And that makes you feel good about working together.
Can you put a human kind of face on this issue? I mean, I think maybe an example would be like somebody working as a housekeeper in a hotel.
We had testimony, and some of it was very emotional. I've talked to housekeepers who've walked into hotel rooms they're supposed to be cleaning up, and they meet a naked man who doesn't want them to leave. One of the elements of the bill includes an electronic panic button so that an individual in that kind of situation can press the button and alert maybe, you know, the front desk for floors below that she has a problem. And so those kinds of situations are really terrifying for individuals, and many of these individual workers are immigrants, and they don't speak English as well and fluently as others, and they don't really have the comfort level that you know, your middle-class white person has with dealing with authority. So it is something we have to be culturally sensitive to as well.
So that's an area where you've been able to find some bipartisan agreement. One of the fault lines in this session seems to be around this issue. I mentioned the gig economy of independent contractors versus employees. I mean, early in session, you seem
Should we talk about hairdressers?
Let's just get it out of the way. But there are independent contractors. They all came and they really didn't like your bill. But that gets to a deeper issue, which is the idea that more and more people are working independently, and in many cases people like that because it gives them flexibility. In other cases, they're not, they or the people employing them are not paying into these systems like unemployment insurance and workers' comp. So again, it seems like this is one where you're trying to find a balance, but right now it seems like it's a big fault line.
It's tough. We saw that, didn't we, with that hearing?
We did, yes.
Yeah,
so.
But I thought that hearing was wonderful because anytime you can get the authentic voices of about 1,000 people
showing up from all over the state
to come and talk to you about their lives, I think that's what we do. That's what why we have hearings is not to listen to the
lobbyists. You pulled the fire alarm and it worked.
I think it was great.
It did in this case.
No, and I really thought it was very helpful. We pulled that bill, we killed that bill, but the issue remains. It's not going to go away. So we have work to do on that issue. I actually have drafted a bill. Senator King, you don't know this yet.
All right.
Here's my thought.
This is the surprise part of the show.
Yeah. A lot of the folks who were testifying about the gig economy, remember this one woman who did Instacart shopping service, ended up at the end of the day, she thought she was going to earn $25 an hour. It ended up at $6 an hour when all the fees were deducted from the company. So I drafted a bill that said, well, if you're going to do independent contractor work, you should at least get minimum wage. What a concept.
Have you introduced it?
No, it's on my desk. I'm reading it today. We have wonderful staff who are very helpful in drafting some of the finer points of the legal landscape.
Well,
if I may just add that, talking of staff, we have excellent staff, both partisan and nonpartisan, that do an absolutely fabulous job for us.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it goes, since you've given me the opportunity, the way the legislature works for the uninitiated is that there are committee staff who support your work. They are nonpartisan. Mm-hmm. They are subject matter experts in many cases. Many of them are attorneys by training. They do this for a profession year-round, and they really are the backbone of how this works.
And we're part-timers.
Yeah, and then each caucus has its own partisan staff. So this, we're 2019. Everywhere you look, there's a Lyft or an Uber driver, at least in urban areas, probably where you live now too.
Yes.
A lot of people are doing this contract work, but that means they're not paying into the system. It means the person hiring them isn't paying into the system. This is a conversation that's getting going, is what is the right balance and what is the trigger for when somebody, you actually are an employee, you're just being categorized as an independent contractor.
So you can find a lot of Uber and Lyft drivers that have a regular job that may have all of those benefits with them, and they do this on the weekends or on the side, but they are an independent contractor. It's a choice. It's as some of the beauticians came and said, I know that I'm not eligible for unemployment. I know that I don't have insurance, but that's my choice. I've chosen because this allows me to do the things that in my life are important to me, take care of my children, take time off to go to their functions at school, allows me to do all of these things. But that's a choice I made. And we ought to give people those choices. It isn't that we got to mandate everything. This is a free society. And we need to look at it as, let's let these people do what they want to do, within reason, obviously. But if they want to be an independent contractor and work in a little cubicle and have their own, set their own time, get their own customers, more power to them.
So what's the flip side of that?
Well, I think we have a lot of work to do on this whole area, and we need some new ideas and good ideas to work around. Right now, individual, and we actually have a Department of Labor Department of Commerce study that's going to be reporting shortly about the demographics of the independent contractors. When I was talking to some of the hairdressers about how did they make it work? Well, a lot of them had worked at another job earlier, and they got a 401k started back then when they had a real job, as they said, or they have a husband who provides their health care, and so they patchwork it together. But it's not a system. It is totally incidental and unclear how to get that piece, the security pieces together for retirement, for health care, for unemployment, for job injuries. So we have got some work to do to create perhaps some new platforms for independent contractors that they could use to gather together as a group and use that voice to get their own needs.
There's been talk about worker boards.
Yeah.
What is this idea?
It's a new idea, and I don't know that it's one that's ready for prime time, but there's conversations about, well, how does this work? And I kind of go backwards and say, well, think about the building trades. Because when, in ancient days, you know, they were called guilds, and they would, they were kind of like men's clubs, I think, and they would pass it along. Sorry.
That's all right. That's all right.
I like historical novels. Anyway, so, you know, they would pass along their trade to their sons, their tools to their sons. They had a group that supported each other. The first, one of the first benefits that they did collectively was a death benefit, so that they could get buried decently. And so those are sort of, now we have building trades journey level workers that travel all over the country, but they have a trust that goes with them. It's portable. It doesn't stop at the state's border. Maybe that's what we need.
And this idea of portable benefits is starting to gain some traction. The idea that instead of having your benefits completely tied to who employs you, that you could take them with you. I could imagine that that might have some appeal for both employers and employees, potentially.
Not yet. I haven't seen that
You haven't
yet.
seen it. So how are portable, to what extent is there a conversation happening in this legislature right now about portable benefits?
We had a bill introduced. Do you remember?
I do.
We had a bill, and I can't remember exactly the title, but it was pretty audacious, something about universal worker rights or something, remember?
Oh,
and,
yeah.
But it sort of opened that door, so the conversation is starting, but we have a lot of work to do ahead. I suspect we'll do some interim work on this, and I'm hoping that Senator King will be at the table while we do that work.
I know that there are critics who think that some of these efforts around independent contractors is sort of a, you know, kind of a backdoor way of trying to get more people ultimately into unions, sort of a post-Janus effort to create these structures, and then maybe it's an opportunity to unionize and to really pull back from an independent contractor economy. What is your view on kind of the politics behind this?
Well, to some degree, I think there's some truth to that. But we need to find a good definition of what an independent contractor is that we can agree on, that protects those people that want to be a true independent contractor. And I think we can do that, but it isn't going to be a 5-minute conversation.
Probably not going to happen this year?
No, I don't.
No,
well, I don't think so.
I don't
no.
see how in the time remaining in this session we get to that agreement. Right. But we do have the conversation underway, and there will be interim conversations and meetings about it, I'm sure.
What about, there are proposals to allow new classes of workers to unionize, assistant attorney generals, even legislative employees.
So we hear it. That's over in the House.
It's a House bill.
Yeah,
but what
we don't
are
have
you
it
hearing
yet.
about that idea?
I think there is, not just in the public sector, in the private sector. If you look at public opinion polls, and I mentioned the millennials and their kind of discontent, I think there's a lot of grumbling and groaning and concern about the future. You know, it used to be people would get pensions if they worked, and they would have a pension that they could retire on, a little bit of Social Security and a pension, and you could go get an RV and go around the country. That doesn't happen anymore for the younger worker. It's like I said, there's been a lot of cost shifting, and that's taking its toll. I don't know what the outcome will be.
Could you support allowing legislative staffers to form a union?
Of course I could.
Oh yeah, you're the former head of the...
Yes, of course I could.
That was a gimme question.
I know that it's politically fraught. I know that, but I do think it also is important. And you know, we had a struggle trying to get to the code of conduct over the last year on sexual harassment, in part because our legislative staff, I think, feels intimidated. They feel like they don't have the right to speak up or to make a formal complaint. We tried in our code of conduct to open those doors for staff and for others, but I still think that giving legal standing is what you have when you're in a union. You actually have legal rights. So it has some merit.
You worked for the Washington State Labor Council for many years, I should know. So.
Yes.
I was also a reporter for many years,
Yes,
and
you
a
were.
member of the union and still am.
So,
I'm not going to say a word.
Well,
but
in terms of unionizing,
I mean, you know, we ask a lot of our staff. They work long hours for the time that we're usually in session. They then are compensated with less hours during the interim. So I mean, you know, to me there are maybe times when a union is an appropriate thing. I just don't see it, and that is not an anti-union statement. It is a statement about this is the way we operate. We have done this for how many hundreds of years, and seems like this year has been 100 years. But I think we just have to be reasonable about it. And I want to go back to the AGs and that. You know, my concern there was we heard from 3 of them. 3 out of 400 or 500 people is not enough to convince me that the group wants to be unionized.
Oh, Senator King, I think you're going to hear from some more now.
And that's fine, and I'm willing to. But I'm just saying there was no in our committee hearing. There was no number mentioned as to who wants this, and that bothered me, to be honest with you. So.
Let's click through. We have 4 minutes left. A couple more issues. Interest arbitration for workers, especially Department of Correction workers. They were here rallying this week. In a nutshell, why should they have interest arbitration?
People working in corrections don't have the right to strike. And they have issues that are not being resolved at the workplace, both safety and health issues as well as pay disputes and other disputes. So
this allows a third-party
interest arbitration is an impartial process, a legal process that gets people to the table to have an agreement. Okay. It's one way to get to an agreement and resolve disputes. Much better, I think, than having a corrections staff that is disgruntled and unhappy and prone, perhaps, to, you know, have disputes on the job. That would be very, very difficult.
Your views on this?
Well, I think I supported the bills.
You did.
Okay.
2 of them as they came out. Okay. And mainly it's because we have this in other areas of correction.
And in fact, it's already being done.
I mean, so it's like, well, how do you say, well, yeah, you can do it, but no, you can't.
Right, I think the Washington State Patrol has it, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, I think that the issue is that many of the law enforcement do. The idea here is having
But if you don't have the right
to
strike, there's got to be a way to help compensate. That's the way I looked at it.
Okay.
So.
Secure scheduling is the term that advocates use, but the idea that if you work for a major employer, and there's a threshold here, but that you will know your schedule 2 weeks in advance, and if they can't mandate overtime, can't change stuff on you without some consideration. Where's that going?
I can't predict at this point. We did get it out of committee, but it went out on a party line.
This is one where you have not found
we haven't found the common ground yet on that, and I don't know that we will. I don't know what the future of that bill is. I know there is some conversation going on, but not as intensively as on some other issues as far as...
Your very brief elevator speech on why you think it's the right thing to do, and then I want to hear from you on why you're...
You know, again, I'll go back to my original point. I like to try and find work-family balance. It's really hard if you're a working mom and you have child care or you have obligations in your family to take care of things. If you don't know what your work schedule is at least a week or 2 in advance, it's really hard to make arrangements. And that's just practical work life for a whole lot of people who work in places like grocery stores and other really important job sectors. So we do have to address this. Some areas already have. I think Oregon already has a statewide law on this. So we're looking at other places.
Secure scheduling, quote unquote.
Well, not my favorite bill. Okay. You know, I get it. Again, you got to have a business that can run their business. And this would have penalized them. And there are lots of businesses that need that flexibility, that need to be able to call in employees on a minute's notice and not be penalized because all of a sudden there's demand. When we started addressing the bill, there were businesses that we were looking at carving out because of their needs, and rightly so. We should carve them out. But if you're going to start carving, where do you stop? And how do you pick the winners? And how do you pick? I hate to use the word loser, but it's a bill that went too far. There's too many businesses that have a very negative impact on.
Okay, I'm going to stop you both there. Senators King and Kaiser, thank you so much for coming in to talk very agreeably about very difficult issues.
Right.
We appreciate it. And when we return, we meet one more new member of Washington's legislature's large and diverse class of freshman lawmakers. We'll be back right after this. And welcome back to Inside Olympia. This year, the Washington legislature welcomed a large and diverse class of new lawmakers. These new members are bringing new ideas and more diverse perspectives. Joining me now is one of the new House Democrats, State Representative Deborah Entenmann. Thank you for being here. Good to see you, and congratulations on your election and joining the legislature.
Well, thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here.
Let's just talk about what brought you to, you worked in the legislature back in 2005. Here you are now as a member of the House chamber. What brought you back to Olympia in the role of a lawmaker? Why did you run for office?
I ran for office because I had had a lot of experience working for a legislator, Congressman Adam Smith. I'd been on his staff for 12 years in different capacities. I had been the district director for the past 3 years, and I was getting to the point where, do I want to do something different? Do I want to retire? And then someone had brought to my attention that there might be an opportunity for me to run in the 47th. It started out a little shaky because a lot of things were going on in the 47th, but I gained the support of some key folks and decided to move forward with an election. But I think my decision to run didn't just happen because I had gotten to a place where what was my future. It was more, other people had come to me, and over time, for the past probably 7 years prior to running, I had different people at different times say, we really think you should run for office. I had gone through training first with a group called Progressive Majority, and then there was a group called the White House Project, and there were just a lot of people standing behind me saying, when you're ready to run, we're here. And so I have to say that when I got a call from the speaker, who how does Frank Chop know my phone number, asking me to have coffee, I was intrigued. I was a little intimidated, but running, when he asked me, I was ready. And so I said yes. I did tell him that, making sure that I could do what I needed to do and still take care of my family, be a contributing person in my family was important, because we couldn't afford to